welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching World Today. This week, while we focus on the huge diplomatic coup by China in West Asia as also in Central America, let's begin with some big news development from the United States of America. Donald Trump became the first U.S. president to face criminal charges after he was indicted by a New York grand jury this week over hush money paid to adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 presidential election. According to reports, he faces more than 30 counts related to business fraud in the indictment. Trump is expected to appear in court on Tuesday. The indictment has been filed under seal and will be announced in the coming days. The charges are not publicly known at this time. The decision is sure to send shockwaves across the country, pushing the American political system, which has never seen one of its ex-leaders confronted with criminal charges, let alone while running again for president, into uncharted territories. It also puts a question mark on Trump's prospects as the Republican nominee for the next presidential elections. Trump released a statement in response to the indictment, claiming it was, and I quote, political persecution and election interference at the highest level in history. A major and historic event took place this month where a peace deal was signed between Iran and Saudi Arabia, brokered by China, taking the world by surprise. An agreement that could put China in a leading role in West Asia, a position once held by the United States of America and even by Russia. But it is not just West Asia. There are countries in many parts of the world that have veered towards Beijing, much to the chagrin of states that have been either troubled or concerned about China's territorial claims and increased aggression. So what allowed these geopolitical tectonic shifts, and will China be able to succeed in finding a permanent resolution to the Iran-Saudi tensions, or will this agreement be short-lived? What are the implications of this development? Let's find out.
A first for China in playing a pivotal role in brokering an agreement that re-established diplomatic relations between Tehran and Riyadh after 7 years of bitter rancor between the region's Shiite, Muslim and Sunni powers. According to the March 10th agreement, both sides decided to re-establish relations and reopen embassies within 2 months. The deal was announced after 4 days of talks in Beijing, timing it with the beginning of his third and unprecedented term as president. Xi Jinping played a critical role in ensuring that Iran and Saudi Arabia find common ground. He visited the Saudi capital Riyadh in December for meetings with oil-rich Gulf Arab nations crucial to China's energy supplies, and also hosted the Iranian president in Beijing in February.
Xi Jinping pointed out that recently, with the joint efforts of China, Saudi Arabia and Iran, the dialogue between Beijing, Saudi Arabia and Iran has been successfully held and achieved major results. This will help improve relations and play a major role in strengthening the unity and cooperation of regional countries and easing regional tensions.
Regarding the matter of Saudi Arabia, we will meet with the Saudi foreign minister in the near future. Until then, we agree that the technical delegations from embassies and consulates of each country should visit and begin the reopening of embassies.
Previously reserved for long-time global heavyweights like the US and Russia, China's entry as mediator is a sign of China's growing diplomatic clout to match its economic footprint in the region. Beijing seems to be breaking out of its traditional role of the past and charting a new course for itself in the strategic space, that of a global peacemaker.
The Americans are not everywhere, so there will be room for Chinese to play. And Chinese are nowhere near what the Soviet Union achieved at the height of the Cold War. So the Chinese have a long way to go. And there's space for this kind of activity because the Americans, for example, couldn't have brokered a peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia because they're at loggerheads with Iran themselves. So I think no one was expecting the Americans to do that. But if it was something, for example, between Qatar and the UAE and Saudi Arabia, the Americans did try to reduce that conflict between them. Iran is a different case. And here in this particular case, the Saudi Arabia, which is very put off with the Americans on the way they've treated Mohammed bin Salman. So they're trying to show that they can diversify their relations. And this is actually a part of that. But if you're a great power, that China is today, there will be enough opportunities. That doesn't mean it has to be at the expense of the Americans in every place.
An economic powerhouse and a major trading partner in the Gulf, Beijing's economic footprint is clearly visible in West Asia or the Middle East since the turn of the 21st century and continues to expand, increasing from $180 billion in 2019 to $259 billion in 2021. Meanwhile, Middle Eastern trade with the United States has declined from $120 billion in 2019 to $82 billion in 2021. China continues to develop its economic ties across regional divides, cementing its position as the largest trading partner to regional powers such as Egypt, Iran, Jordan, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The deal elicited a lot of mixed reactions globally. While the US welcomed the decision, many countries that have faced continued aggression from Beijing, like India, maintained silence.
From our perspective, anything that can help reduce tensions, avoid conflict, and curb in any way dangerous or destabilizing actions by Iran is a good thing. And as you know, in this particular case, the Saudis and the Iranians have been talking for some time, going back a couple of years, including in Baghdad and in Oman. And to the extent that China facilitated a conclusion of this agreement to restore diplomatic relations, that's a good thing.
Why now? Iran's nuclear activities and enrichment of uranium beyond 80%, which means crossing the nuclear threshold, meant there was a need to engage Tehran. Soured ties with Washington DC certainly helped Beijing make inroads. Secondly, there was growing frustration in Saudi Arabia in working with the Biden administration, particularly when it came to the Khashoggi trial in the US, which led the Saudis to diversify their security interests and work with other players. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is in talks with Syria to reopen its embassy in the war-torn nation for the first time in a decade.
China welcomes the agreement reached between Syria and Saudi Arabia on reopening embassies of the two countries. Syria's return to the Arab family will be conducive to the unity and revitalization of Arab countries. I would also like to stress that China firmly supports Arab countries in strengthening their unity and cooperation.
This growing proximity of West Asia to China could lead to de-dollarization of the petrodollar. American pressure on Saudi Arabia to increase oil output to ease global energy crunch owing to the Russia-Ukraine war did not go down well with Riyadh. This deal and any positive movement could lead to ease on Iran's economy, which has suffered greatly because of US-led sanctions. The message from China is that only traditional forms of democracy are not the beacon of light for peace, that Chinese form of government is kosher, and that China can also broker peace between governments that also do not have government structures that are considered democratic according to the West. Finally, the agreement and its success depends on the stakeholders living up to their part of the deal and end regional conflicts that have fueled proxy wars in Yemen, frustrated stabilization efforts in Iraq, and led to a protracted crisis in Lebanon and a political stalemate in Syria, all deeply entrenched in the Saudi-Iran rivalry.
China indeed is playing a high-stakes game for global influence. To discuss a lot more on not just in West Asia but across the world, I'm being joined by Ina with Taiho Institute. Many thanks for joining us here on. Let's begin with the diplomatic coup. The fact that do you see a bigger, larger global peacemaker? And what does this mean for the West that has in West Asia, what they call Middle East?
Real sea change. I mean, what you have. It always talked about, there's only one end. Modernity means that everybody will be like the U.S., liberal, democratic, capitalist nation. China is in a multipolar world. A, they don't think that it has worked. B, they've resisted it and developed their own path, just as India is doing it. So what they want to do is talk about the means So it's more about accepting that countries have to be secure. Countries have to have a development path that, internally, and they have to be respected for their unique culture, political, economic systems. They can't be imposed on or told what to do by other nations. So this is just the beginning of what China is trying to accomplish. And in order to, get over the very loud international media, they decided to try to put it into action rather than just talking about it. So their initial pass at this was trying to get Iran and Saudi Arabia to have diplomatic ties restored. That's very important. China is not coming in with an agenda. They're simply trying to do it. Now, this is not just about China. This is about a different kind of approach, an approach that India shares, this idea that non-alignment, that countries should not be imposed on, that instead they should reach consensus.
Right, Anya, interesting. But the timing of this announcement was also interesting because it coincided with President Xi Jinping's third term. So that in itself is historic, but does China then attach a lot of importance to this deal becoming a success, that it shouldn't fail?
Well, they can't make it happen. This is not like the United States where the U.S. will come in and guarantee and push people around. This is simply a way of bringing people to the table who have previously not been able to talk to each other. It was 6 or 7 years ago that they ended, the two countries ended their diplomatic missions to each other, and it's important that they come together. I mean, the Middle East is extremely important, not only to China, but also to India and many other places that need oil and energy. So at this point, it's just a question of how can you get people together? And this is the same thing that they're trying in Ukraine. The 12 points idea of peace was less about imposing things. It was really about how can we agree, here are 12 points, that we should be accepting, no nukes, and less of, or get rid of all these sanctions. They're not working, they're not helping, and certainly throwing more bombs at a situation isn't going to make peace, suddenly come forward.
Third and a very important point, the story of which we will be playing out in just a bit, is that of Honduras now establishing diplomatic relations with China and severing ties with Taiwan at a time when we're seeing Tsai Ing-wen actually go to Central America to ensure that the other allies do not break ties with Taiwan. Are we looking at a very jittery Taiwan and the West and the United States of America vis-a-vis a China that is increasingly making its presence felt not just in West Asia but also in Latin America?
Well, I think you have to look very carefully at why Honduras got out of it. I mean, when Tsai Ing-wen came into office, there were 22 nations that were still maintaining diplomatic ties. Now, today, there are only 13. 5 of those are in South America. And what Honduras saw was that these other nations were doing very well with the Belt and Road Initiative, that they were getting investment, that it was much better to be economically within the circuit. Now, that's not to say that Honduras was not cut off by mainland China. They had trade. What they want to do is increase trade and also more investment. So they gave an ultimatum basically to Taiwan. They said they wanted $2.5 billion in forgivable loans basically, and to basically redo some of their debt, another $2 billion. Unfortunately, that was not answered by Taiwan, and as a result, they switched allegiances. Now, it wasn't unexpected. The new president of Honduras had run on this idea that they should be closer to China, and it's one of these things where country to country, there had been some feeling that the previous administration had been backed by Taiwan, and that always has bad repercussions. It's very difficult for countries to stay neutral when they are in fact dealing with the incumbent government.
Right. On that note, Aina Tangen, many thanks for joining us with your brilliant perspective and where China stands today and where it's going. Thank you.
Thank you, Geeta.
China's growing global footprint is not confined to one region alone. Closer to the US and much to its discomfort, Beijing has broken ground in Central America, with Honduras establishing diplomatic relations with China and severing ties with longtime ally Taiwan. A huge blow to DC and to Taipei. This could change dynamics in what is known as America's backyard and serves as a stumbling block to Taiwan's efforts to be recognized as a state.
China has used its economic might to cement its strategic interests. In the case of Honduras, the two sides were in talks for a while. But according to Taiwan's Foreign Minister, Joseph Wu, the Honduran Foreign Minister in a letter had demanded a total of $2.45 billion in aid, including to build a hospital and dam and to write off debt.
Honduras has seen another part of the world, especially Asia, and China is a very important international player. So we need to be close to these possibilities to seek benefits for the Honduran people.
Honduras's establishment of bilateral relations with China is a political decision that is based on the One China principle and without any preconditions. China highly appreciates this. Diplomatic ties are not something for trade.
There isn't a single big power that has formal relations with Taiwan. Most continue to endorse the One China principle as a widely accepted basic norm in international relations and a common understanding of the global community. In fact, Honduras, an important country in Central America, is facing an outstanding problem in development. For the United States, Latin America is critical in securing its own strategic and security interests, and therefore the Monroe Doctrine is always cited. What is the Monroe Doctrine? Promulgated to contain European expansionism in the Western Hemisphere, the doctrine served to ensure no hostile interference against the US. The United States would not get involved in European affairs. The United States would not interfere with existing European colonies in the Western Hemisphere. No other nation could form a new colony in the Western Hemisphere. If a European nation tried to control or interfere with a nation in the Western Hemisphere, the United States would view it as a hostile act against their nation. The recent move by Honduras could have a deep impact in Central America, and the cost of it would be for Taiwan to bear, which now only has formal diplomatic relations with 13 countries, mostly poor and developing countries in Central America, the Caribbean and the Pacific.
Scotland witnessed a historic moment. Hamza Yusuf was sworn in as the first minister to become the first ever racial minority and Muslim to lead Scotland. For Indians here, developments in Scotland and the UK have had interesting reactions. One of the messages that was doing the round was that with Hamza Yusuf of Pakistani heritage elected First Minister of Scotland and Rishi Sunak being Prime Minister of the UK, should the Scots vote for independence, an Indian and a Pakistani will decide on the partition of UK. To add to the irony, Sunak's grandparents were born in Gujranwala, Pakistan, and Yusuf's grandparents were born in Gujarat, India. But jokes apart, this is indeed a huge moment in Britain's history. What impact will it have on Scotland and its future in or out of Britain? Here is a report.
As Mohammed Yusuf worked in the Singer sewing machine factory in Clydebank, as Rahmat Ali Bhutta stamped tickets on the Glasgow Corporation buses, they could not have imagined, as I say in their wildest dreams, that 2 generations later, that their grandson would one day be on the cusp of being Scotland's First Minister.
Born in Glasgow with a father from Pakistan and mother from Kenya, this 37-year-old took over from Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland's first female leader and the country's longest-serving one yet.
I therefore declare Hamza Yusuf duly elected as the Scottish National Party leader.
He was announced the Scottish National Party's sixth leader in Edinburgh, making the end of what had become an acrimonious and unpredictable leadership contest, and then making him the first Muslim politician elected to be a national leader in a Western democracy. Setting out his goals, Yusuf said he would concentrate on tackling the cost of living crisis and make a renewed push for independence.
I make no apology whatsoever for having a Minister for Independence, because my goodness, we need independence now more than ever before. We need it now. We need it now more than ever before, because in energy-rich Scotland we have Scots that are fuel poor because of the UK government's policies. We need independence now more than ever before, because we have more food banks in this country at any other time than ever before because of over a decade of austerity. So I would say to Douglas Ross, to the UK government, we will continue to advocate and to advance independence because we need it now more than ever before.
Yusuf takes over a party with an overriding objective to end Scotland's 3 centuries-long union with England. The most immediate challenge facing Yusuf will be to unite his party, and the most immediate electoral test for him will be the next UK general election, due to take place by January 2025. If the SNP lose seats in that contest, Yusuf might not have the tenure that Nicola Sturgeon or her predecessor had.
That's all in this edition of World Today, but before I go, March 30th marked the first ever International Zero Waste Day. And the focus is to have a circular economy and ensure that everybody fights climate change. Here's a video on one aspect of zero waste and moving towards zero waste, that's electronic waste. Take a look.
Electronic gadgets make the world go round. But when they're done, where do they go? 50 million tons of e-waste every year, weighing more than all the airliners ever made. A fifth is recycled, and the rest degrades and decays because we want that new laptop, we want that new TV, washing machine, air conditioner, vacuum cleaner, hairdryer. Our demand for new tech never tires. But how much more can our planet take of machines that are made to break? We need gadgets we can lease, repair, and recycle. A circular economy that spins like vinyl to create new from the old. We need industries to design smarter products that last longer. We need policies to manage e-waste better. And when you buy your tech, think about where it'll end. Together, we can put this planet on the mend.